Order! Order! You are an incorrigible delinquent at times. Behave yourself, man!
I've been going out with a girl, her name is Julie, but last night she said to me when we were watching telly.
There is this understanding here that though elections cannot be won except on the centre ground and parties cannot hold government except from the centre ground, there's still a recognition, surely, that there are plenty of left-wing people in this country that want somebody left-wing to vote for. Let's go to the calls. Frank from Canary Wharf, tell us what you think.
Hello, Maajid. These phrases or terminologies, centre ground, left, right, really mean nothing unless you identify what that means. And that's been the trick, actually, is that we still have this terminology, but we've actually moved further and further towards the right. Privatisation of everything is now sort of common. It's probably almost centre ground now.
Privatisation of everything is centre ground?
Well, it's sort of it's accepted. And also, I just want to get.
Let's move beyond the terms. Let's get to the substance of the point here. Where do you think Labour should position itself, and who do you think their leader should be?
Where it should position itself is to deal with the many things that have happened, and this didn't come out in the press because it's 80% owned by 5 people. National debt has risen from 850 billion to 2.25 trillion, 10,000 less firefighters, 10,000 less border officials, 20,000 less prison officers, 25,000 less police. The list is endless, and it's neither left or right. It is the management of society.
Frank, let's move away again from... I don't want to get hung up on the semantics of the terms. I'm asking you where you think Labour should position itself and who the next Labour leader should be. I don't think it should be a conversation about the meaning of left-wing and the meaning of right-wing here. This is not really the debate we're trying to have.
And it's become meaningless anyway. What we have are deep issues in the country that need addressing. And Corbyn's agenda, though it wasn't publicised, it became personalised about Corbyn with a lot of lies, was addressing those deep-seated problems that have developed over the last 10 years.
Let's cut to the chase. Let's cut to the chase. We don't have much time. So you basically what you're saying, between all of that stuff you've just said, what I'm hearing is you think the next Labour leader should be somebody in the Corbyn camp.
Well, if I said to you that Corbyn increased the Labour's vote share more than any party leader since 1945...
Frank, that wasn't what I asked you, Frank. With respect, that's a politician's answer. I'm asking you directly whether you think the next Labour leader should be in the Corbyn...
It's not a politician's answer.
Hold on, Frank.
Maajid,
Frank,
it's not a politician's answer.
It's Maajid, Frank. But anyway, I'm asking you directly whether you think the next Labour leader should be somebody from Corbyn's camp. I'm not going to attack you for saying yes to that question, because I've just said that there is a constituency in this country, 32.2%, who voted for Corbyn, who may well appreciate another left-wing option to vote for. Do you think that the next Labour leader should be of the Corbyn mould?
As I said, I don't think it matters, because whoever comes from the left will be demolished by the majority 80% press.
That's it, Frank, please. I'm trying to get an answer from you as to who you think the next Labour leader should be. So it does matter.
And my answer is, and particularly that you have chosen this afternoon to frame it about Labour rather than a government that's just got in.
No, Frank, what is your answer?
I'm saying it's irrelevant, and you are part of the irrelevance because you're framing it this way.
Frank,
we're not opening.
It's irrelevant who the next Labour leader becomes.
No, that you are... The argument is framed in this way. We have a concept... You are actually part of the
It's irrelevant that the argument is framed
up.
in a way to ask who the next Labour leader should be. Frank, are you listening to yourself?
Sorry?
Are you hearing yourself?
I am, yeah.
I'm asking you a simple question. What is wrong with ideological dogmatists? I'm asking you a simple question. Who should the next Labour leader be, and should they be of the Corbyn worldview? And you're not answering the question.
Could you hear yourself?
Okay, Frank, do you think there should be another Labour leader?
And this is what the media will do. They will confine the question. They won't open the debate. They won't address
confined question who the next Labour leader should be. Wow. Did you back Corbyn in this last election?
I voted Labour, yeah.
See, this is
I back Corbyn's policies.
This is a beautiful conversation because it demonstrates exactly and everything that is wrong with you people. Like, I'm just asking you, yes, you people that are Corbynistas. I'm asking you a simple question, and you're arguing with me as to, you're calling it irrelevant. Should the next Labour leader be somebody like Jeremy Corbyn and of his worldview or not? And you're calling that an irrelevant question. That is one of the most pressing questions for the Labour Party right now.
I think you misunderstood me then. What I'm saying is...
No, I don't want anything else, Frank. I just want you to answer the question, please. Who do you think the next Labour leader should be?
I don't know, because I don't think it matters. There wouldn't be anybody who could carry a decent... It doesn't...
Okay. All right, thanks, Frank. Thank you very much. Oh, my God. What do you do with people like that? Seriously. What? That's why you lost. That is why you lost so badly. You shouldn't be antagonising somebody who just said that he would be... that he recognises that there's a constituency in this country, 32.2%, that voted for Corbyn, and maybe the next leader needs to be somebody that speaks to that constituency, either Rebecca Long-Bailey, either Angela Rayner, and that maybe all the moderates should just go and join a centrist party that is actually proud of being centrist. Having just said that, Frank comes on, who admits to having voted for Corbyn, and decides to pick a fight with me over the fact I'm asking him who he thinks the next Labour leader should be. It's absurd. Corbynistas could pick a fight with themselves in a room. And this is the People's Front of Judea versus the Judean People's Front from the life of Brian. This is Stalin killing Trotsky with a pickaxe. This is religion. That's what it is. It's religion. It's Catholics versus Protestants. Why did you call this radio station to pick a fight with me after I've just agreed that there is a room for a left-wing party in this country? And I just wanted you to either tell me whether you back Rebecca Long-Bailey or Angela Rayner or, anyone from John McDonnell onwards on that side of the party. Strange people.
A nuanced, layered conversation about the BBC. For me, there probably is a powerful argument for suggesting that the non-news arms of it are redundant, or at least the model of funding them is redundant, given that organisations like Netflix and Amazon and big studios are making their own entertainment programmes. But the Reithian principle, you see, of inform, educate and entertain, that goes out the window when you throw it all into the commercial sector, because in the commercial sector, it's almost all about bums on seats, which means that if it turns out that educating people or informing people doesn't get bums on seats, like the last caller on the political phone-in about educating people without them realising, then you're only left with information, like a sort of intellectual diabetes, where all you're getting is sugar. But if you lose the news arm, which everybody at the moment thinks is biased, you lose something really valuable. I've got a frog in my throat. John's in Dulwich. You can entertain the troops while I have a good cough, John. Carry on.
Well, I think that the BBC, having worked there previously, is the most exclusive, champagne, socialist, biased club in the land.
Do you?
It's biased because...
Why did they let you in?
Well, they didn't let me in for very long, years, but
Same
not
here.
into their elite club. And what goes on at the BBC is basically doesn't reflect the real world that it reports into.
So which bits of the BBC are we talking about? Are you suggesting that EastEnders is implausible, or are you suggesting that there's a political bias in the news coverage?
Well, no, I'm saying that the actual organisation itself...
Yeah, but you just sound like a disillusioned ex-employee. I mean...
no, not disillusioned one bit.
Right.
When I came out of the BBC, I did extremely well for myself. I've got no axe to grind, and I was revered there.
You've got no axe to grind, and you were revered by all the Champagne socialists.
Yeah,
right.
Absolutely.
Okay. So what's your grievance then?
No, it's no grievance. That's what I'm trying to make out to you. It's just an observation.
So it's a good thing that it's a massive club of elitist Champagne socialists?
Well, only to the extent that it takes money, no matter what it puts out, and in the actual reporting of certain areas of life...
For example?
Well, politics is one of them.
Right.
And it is biased.
So how?
There's no doubt about it. Laura Kunsberg,
yes,
the glee on her face when she was asking Theresa May, are you going to resign?
Do you think she's left-wing?
Shouting it across Downing Street at her.
You think she's
and there was glee. It was actually akin to Nicola Sturgeon, having her moment.
I just
when
need
the
to
Liz Beverley
clarify, are you
lost her
accusing Laura
seat.
Kunsberg of being a Labour Party sympathiser, a supporter of Jeremy
Didn't
Corbyn?
say that.
No, I know.
Didn't say that.
But I know, that's why I'm having to ask you the question. What are you... Because you accused her of being
absolutely not.
biased.
She was not impartial when she showed so much glee.
So who does she
in
favour?
her face and voice when asking if Theresa May
John,
was
please,
going to resign.
Who does
That's
she
not
favour?
impartial.
No, so she's anti-Conservative or just anti-Theresa May?
Well, she might have done that to a Labour Prime Minister.
Well, then she'd
but
be
it wasn't
impartial, wouldn't she?
No.
So if she treated them both,
Because she should not have had the
exactly
glee in
the
her face
same,
when asking the question.
if she treated them both exactly the same, that would be evidence that she's not impartial.
That would mean that she was working even-handed.
Right.
But it
So
doesn't
she is
necessarily say
impartial
she's not
then.
impartial.
So what's the difference?
Yep. Oh, absolutely.
Eh?
If you are
If I say what's the
impartial
difference, you can't say absolutely as an answer.
No. If she treated all of the people she interviewed in the same manner and showing the same expressions
Yes.
and with the same diligence,
Yes.
then I would say that she's working impartially,
Right.
because she's doing it to everybody the same.
But you don't think she does
So
do
she
that?
doesn't.
So who does she
Doesn't.
favour for the 7th time?
I haven't got a clue.
Right. Well, that was
She
a
was
very
just
illuminating call, John. I can tell you what, John, I can see why they revered you at the BBC. You're a genius.
Let's hear from Lizzie in Torquay in Devon. Hello, Lizzie.
Oh, hello, Sheila. Well, I think my country's gone absolutely stark raving bonkers. We've had 9 years of austerity and we voted for more. And it's going to be far, far worse, because now they've got the majority. You've got, in my opinion, a pathological liar as leader. We've seen what he's done and people voted. I would beg Jeremy Corbyn and John McDonnell to stay on, to not go,
Lizzie.
to stand their ground and stay.
Lizzie. 2 catastrophic failures to win. Well, 1 catastrophic failure to win and another one just a loss. I mean, come on.
No, but these 2 men are honest and honourable and they both have integrity. The press and the media launched a campaign of utter persecution, the likes of which I have never seen before in my 64 years
Describe
on
it to
this
me.
planet.
Describe it to me. And describe it to me and tell me who said what.
The lies, the constant,
Tell it to me. Which
lies.
newspaper, which radio programme, which television
Well, it was
programme, which
mainly all of them,
journalist?
the
Tell me.
anti-Semitism, the connections to Russia, to Palestine, to the IRA.
Lizzie, let's take those subjects one by one. The anti-Semitism, they are being investigated by the Equality and Human Rights Commission. They have accepted as a party that they had a problem with anti-Semitism and didn't deal with it effectively enough or quickly enough. They've said it themselves, right? They've said they'll abide by what the Equality and Human Rights Commission says, and we'll know that soon, right? So that's the anti-Semitism thing. You talk about the stuff that was said about Russia. Jeremy Corbyn's instinct, and I think this did him enormous electoral damage, his instinct when Russia used a chemical weapon on UK soil was to ask them nicely if they had. What does that tell you about his leadership and his interest in country? What does that tell you?
Well,
That's not me being mean to him. That's not me as a journalist being mean to him. It's not the media lying about him. It's not anybody denigrating him. It's me reporting what he did and asking you to explain it to me.
Why would he not ask Russia? You can't just go around blaming different countries for things without any evidence to back it up.
They didn't just blame Russia without any evidence. There was a balanced, careful judgment made by our security services, and his instinct is to disbelieve them.
Well, Jeremy Corbyn tends to look deeper and go further down.
The rest of us are fools.
Thought,
the rest of us are fools.
I'm not saying that. The rest of us. Does everybody go with that then, or is nobody allowed to stand up and say, "Well, actually, yes, I think he showed great courage in certain things that he's done in the past, which have all been totally twisted." Very few leaders would sit down with people who are terrorists and try and get them to open their minds to a different way forward. Because, you know, you've got one side killing the other side bombing the other side, and nobody's in there apart from joining in and saying, oh, we'll help, we'll put more money in and get more money back, and we'll help bomb this or that. But Corbyn goes in there and goes, no, hang on a minute, let's just sit down and talk and see if we can get this to stop, and to stop for good.
Do you believe then that Mr. Corbyn and Mr. McDonnell sitting pretty for 5 more years and waiting for the country to catch up with them, that's what will make them win the next election, is it?
Well, if the press, when the country sees what Boris Johnson and his merry men are going to be doing, I'm one of the 1950s women. I'm in the welfare state, so I know better than many people out there what the Tories are already doing. And in my view, it is gross negligence, manslaughter.
All right, but Lizzie, you've done what quite a lot of supporters of Jeremy Corbyn have done today when I've spoken to you. You've immediately attacked the Conservative Party. I'm going to focus on the Conservative Party and the responsibility that Boris Johnson now has to the people who've given him this majority. I'm going to focus on that after 3. But I want to ask you whether you really think that John McDonnell and Jeremy Corbyn sitting on the same manifesto for 5 more years and presenting it in 2024 is the way they're going to win.
Yep, because it was a brilliant manifesto. It helped everybody. You know, a green industrial revolution, help for the children, help for the elderly.
So how do you explain the loss? How do you explain the loss?
Well, therein lies, because I can't explain it, Sheila, because hundreds of thousands of people turned out wherever Jeremy Corbyn went, and they cheered him.
But Lizzie, however big those rallies were, and you're right, some of them were, however big they are, they don't represent a nation of 60+ million people or 45 million people having a vote.
In most places where Johnson went, very few people turned out.
That doesn't mean anything. It doesn't mean anything. It doesn't mean anything.
The man who was cheered been thrown out, and the man who was jeered is back in again.
Because most voters, Lizzie, don't go to rallies. Most voters just live their lives and look to the men and women who knock on their door, who sit on the telly and talk about what they're going to do for the country, and they make their own judgments that way.
You know, I would query that from the very moment, the second almost, that the polling stations closed, the media were coming out, it's going to be a landslide for the Tories, it's looking disastrous. And we had...
but it was, and it was. Because we couldn't say, Lizzie, it's called an exit poll. Lizzie, we couldn't, under electoral law, Lizzie, please listen, under electoral law, neither I nor any other journalist on polling day, just before the polls closed, could sit there saying, well, it's bound to be a loss for Labour. Oh, it's going to be terrible for Labour. Nobody could do that. So at 10 o'clock when the exit poll came, at 10...
And Laura, the BBC...
No, they did not. No, they did not.
She said she'd seen the postal
not before the election.
Because the Met Police ended up contacting her about it because there was such an explosion.
I'm talking about the exit poll. 10 o'clock at night, election night. I'm talking about the exit poll.
20,000 people, I think it was based on.
But it was right, wasn't it?
But, well, I don't know.
Well, it was. Yes, it was.
The egg?
It was.
I'm throwing it in and saying...
Oh, Lizzie, we've entered conspiracy theory territory now, so I'm going to stop. But listen, thank you for your... Well, Lizzie's in for the long haul. She's in for the long haul. She's sticking with it and hopes that the electorate will eventually catch up with Jeremy Corbyn and John McDonnell.
Jeff is next in Basildon. Hi, Jeff. How was your voting experience on Thursday?
Yeah, I literally went into the polling booth. I've been a lifelong Labour supporter, and I literally held my nose and my cross against the Conservative Party. Wasn't an easy thing to do, but Jeremy Corbyn, in my mind, is no better than a communist. His ideas, associations with some extremists like the IRA or Hamas. What was the final nail in the coffin for me is when I learned from LBC, from Maajid Nawaz, went through a list of details about what he'd done and where he'd been associated with, including receiving £20,000 from the government of Iran for basically supporting them.
So, given that he's going to be off, Jeff, I mean, he's not going immediately, but he won't be around for the next election, does Labour then automatically get your vote, or are you a bit more fluid these days?
I'm a bit more fluid. I mean, I've been left-wing all my life, I guess, but I think, in some ways, I've taken a red pill, and I think I've woken up to a lot of things which I didn't realise weren't quite correct. And
wow.
I think, if anything, I've actually turned right-wing, strangely enough. I mean, I'm not a great fan of Boris. I think he's a liar and a cheat, but perhaps that's what we need. I don't know.
Wow. Are you hearing yourself, Jeff?
Yes, I am. Yeah, I am. It sounds completely stupid, I know, but he's a good leader. I will give him that. And he's very affable, I guess, and he comes across well. I did vote for Maggie Thatcher back in the day as a one-off when I was very young. But ever since then, I've voted for Labour. But I believe in Brexit. If he delivers a Canada-style trade agreement and delivers his promises on the NHS and everything else, then I will vote for him again.
Maybe, Jeff, voting as Conservative is just something you do every 30 years.
Well, maybe, you're right. Yeah.
We'll see what happens next time. Evelyn next in Croydon. Hi, Evelyn. How are you?
Hello. I'm not too bad, thank you. Thank you for asking.
And how was voting for you?
I did vote for Boris Johnson, but I've got to be honest, towards the end I was a bit angry with him because he seemed to not face up to scrutiny. I mean, you had one of your callers earlier said he was leadership. I mean, he didn't man up to any interview with Andrew Neil and then hiding in the fridge and, I got a bit angry, and I think the other main reason was Jeremy Corbyn was definitely a failure.
Right. Why did you still vote for Boris Johnson if you thought he hadn't, he didn't man up and he was hiding in a fridge?
Well, this was towards the end. Not at the beginning. Towards the end, I mean, I've gone off. I had gone off Jeremy Corbyn for a long time, because he the anti-Semitism was one of them. He had he sat on the fence regarding Brexit. There was no leadership there. So.
And Evelyn, what does Boris Johnson need to do in the next 5 years to persuade you to vote for him again?
Well, he needs to look at national health, care of the elderly, policing.
Keep all his promises, basically.
Well, I hope he will, because if he does that, then he will get in again.
He'll be in the deep freeze for you. Evelyn, thank you.
Burnley, just one of the many northern towns to turn from red to blue, and all facing the same issues: poverty, low wages, and the struggle to find a place to call home. Take Jordan and Anthony, desperate for someone to fix their lives, both in work on 0-hour contracts, living in a bedsit. Is that your number one priority, housing mixed with jobs?
Employment, housing, yeah. Permanent employment.
Permanent employment, yeah. Not 0-hour contracts, stuff like that.
Have you got hope that Boris Johnson's Conservatives can lift you guys out of this poverty?
Absolutely, yeah.
You've got hope?
Absolutely.
32, 4. Just beyond the basin, in the nearby town of Clermont, the price of beef cattle is running at a premium. 44. These cattle men and women have coexisted with coal mines for generations, they tell us.
You're a man of science, you're a vet. What do you think about climate change, the question of carbon emissions that will result from this coal being burnt?
Nothing at all. One volcanic eruption anywhere will blow out 10 years of that. I'm not a climate change person. It's been happening since the world was formed.
So there are now applications for multiple mines here in the Galilee Basin, and if they're approved, their total production could be as much as 330 megatons per annum. Now that's more coal than the total Australia currently exports.
The difference it's going to make in the atmosphere is very small.
My understanding is the Galilee Basin, if you total up the emissions of what's held there, it would actually mean that it would enter the list of countries of the biggest emitters, I think at number 7, like above the UK. So the emissions, they're not nothing. The emissions that are going to come out of the ground.
That's the electricity for India and China. And you're going to deprive them because you've got some idea that the world could globally warm. Well, you know, I don't want to get out there. I'm not a climate denier, but I represent the Barrier Reef. In the short term, we have to get through this period, and we get through this period with the cheapest form by a long, long way, which is coal.
But isn't there a danger that by the time the coal's finished, the reef's finished too?
No, that's absolutely untrue. The amount of CO2 that would be in the atmosphere is not going to affect the reef.
For Conservative federal MPs like Bob Katter, it's a vote-winning timeline. Burn the coal fast, deal with the reef later.
Jerry's in Chelsea. Hi, Jerry.
Hi, Iain. Great conversation here. I wonder if I could just throw something in there. What it is my family, we were always Labour supporters and voters, the whole of my family, big family, brothers, sisters, cousins, brother-in-laws. My mum, my dad was a constituency Labour Party chairman for Stratford-on-Avon at one point. And we always supported the Labour Party, and where I work, loads of people were always Labour voters, but I'm telling you, nearly everyone I know voted Tory.
And all for the same reason?
No, I think you've made a fair point. Corbyn himself wasn't popular, but I didn't actually mind Corbyn so much. You know, he's a guy. It's not really all about him. But the Brexit betrayal is a massive thing, so there's no point going over and over it. We all get that, and those 60 seats were pretty predictable. A lot of them would go. No, I think there's a deeper thing here, and I'm just going to drop it into you, and you tell me. But it seems to me that the Labour Party's left the working class, and I mean white working class here, and I'm not saying this is a racist. I've got black friends. I'm not in any way bothered. But the white working class feel that a lot of people I talk to, that the Labour Party left us because being so EU, they've allowed the unions to be, well, weakened to practically nothing, cheap labour to flood the market. They've been out of tune with us for a long time. That's why we voted Brexit, and the Labour Party doesn't support it.
I think that's an interesting point, and I think back to, it must have been about 2008, 2009, when in Barkingham-Dagenham, the BNP got various councillors elected. And I can remember going to, and a friend of mine was standing in the 2010 election in Dagenham against John Cruddas. And so I spent a bit of time there and doing quite a bit of door knocking. And I also interviewed Nick Griffin in Dagenham. And in a sense, Margaret Hodge raised the alarm at that point that Labour was abandoning its white working class areas, and they were feeling betrayed. And this was 10 years ago. And they don't seem to have learnt the lessons from that.
No lessons. And the Brexit vote showed that, because I know you're saying about working class, and I get you, but we are working people. I work as a painter decorator, and I work for a living. So we're working people. I know your dad's a farmer, and I know farmers, and they work hard. People who work for a living, we care about our jobs and we care about our communities. And when you're just seeing your community flooded, and you know, it doesn't matter how many times Labour deny it. You try getting a council flat or a housing association flat. There's endless Polish people and Lithuanians or whatever in there. You can't get in there. I know someone who asked, and they were told they'd be on a waiting list for 12 years.
And you see, when you say something like that, there will be people listening to you thinking, he is a racist.
No, I'm not a racist. A racist is someone who hates other people. Now, I spend a lot of time, because I work in London, and London doesn't look like London that my mum and dad married in. London looks like a multicultural... It's like being in some other country. It isn't like...
So you don't...
That doesn't mean you're racist.
Well, it kind of does, actually. I mean, when you say, London's become multicultural, that indicates to me that you don't want it to be multicultural, so that indicates to me that you do have these sentiments.
I believe in balance. I believe people can come here and work hard and have a life, and I support that 100%.
And do you not think that the Polish and Lithuanian people you were talking about generally do that?
I think some of them work really hard and they're very decent people, and they have my 100% support.
Just like some British people work very hard and they're very decent people, and just as there are lots that don't.
Yep. Can I just say this? There's a benefit class as well. You're right, and it's not just working class now. There's a benefit class. You could say there's an immigrant class.
They are not immigrants. Immigrants come to this country because they want to work, and generally
not all. Okay, Ian. Let me
there
ask
will be
you
a
two
very
questions.
very small minority that come because they think they can fleece the benefits
Yeah,
system.
but you're just repeating the Liberal agenda.
No.
Ian.
I'm really not. I'm talking facts.
Okay, can I ask you a question? Straight question.
Go on, then.
Do you know how many billions of pounds are paid out in universal credit and benefits to non-British born citizens? Do you know the answer to that question?
No, I don't.
You don't, do you? Well, go and Google it, mate. Do you know how many...
Do you know?
Yeah, I do.
What is it,
billions. The last figure I read was something like 5.4 billion. So that's not right what you said, is it? Go and have a look. How many housing... It's true. Go and have a look. How many housing association flats and houses are taken by non-British born citizens?
But you're not racist.
And that's where the problem is. No, it's not about racist. This is our country. Who built this country? Your dad, our dad, our granddad. Yeah. So does that not mean if your sister needed some social housing, should she be at the back of the queue, or should she have a front of the queue place? Do you think there's any justification in that?
Well, I don't know how the queuing system works in terms of how it's all allocated, and I completely understand.
A person from the EU, and you're just proving why Labour lost 17.4 million of us, because a person from the EU can step to the front of the housing queue and take a house in a... Yes, they can.
Complete rubbish.
It's done on points. The point system does not recognise any nationality.
Oh, so you think that somebody from Lithuania, just because they happen to be Lithuanian, they get an advantage in the housing system?
If they've got a kid or they've got whatever points, there's no advantage to British people, is the point, Ian. None at all. So British people get no favouritism on jobs, on anything. So of course the NHS is overloaded, housing is overloaded. 8 million extra people and their families, right, means there's less housing, less jobs. Our unions are worth nothing because they've been destroyed by the EU. And the working class aren't all stupid. We see the problem that the EU has damaged this country. Right? And Labour is out of tune with us. So we've gone to the Tories because they're saying they're going to build houses, they're going to look after the NHS, and they're going to deliver Brexit. And it's nothing to do with being racist. That's what the Labour Party always does. They call everyone racist.
Because, mate, you are giving me evidence with virtually every word that you say that you may not think you're racist, you may not think you have a racist bone in your body, but virtually the whole conversation will have convinced most of our listeners that you kind of do. You aren't an overt racist. You're not going to discriminate and shout at someone to their face and all the rest of it. But all the attitudes that you've just displayed would indicate that you've got something against people who aren't quite like you. And that is racism. And I don't really want to hear any more of it. Jerry, thank you.
Hello, Robert. Hi.
Hiya, Sheila. Thank you for having me on your show.
Pleasure.
I was just walking my dog and I was listening to your radio show, and your two previous callers who were calling about remaining, they got me really upset. One said that, they wish the country, that it goes under, basically, that we all take a lesson from voting Brexit. And then your other caller called us all stupid.
I know.
Now, what kind of a society do we live in where we have a democratic vote and we get called stupid after the result? I mean, what kind of a country are we living in, and what kind of a country are we going to have if they're going to keep calling us stupid and thick and we didn't know what we voted for?
No, and also there was no... the lady who called and said a huge amount of people Googled what is the EU. Well, you can't tell whether they were leavers or remainers, can you, just because they Googled it?
No, that's what I mean. You can't just make an assumption on something you've seen. And
tell me this then, Robert. You've got what you voted for eventually. Nearly, anyway. We're nearly there.
Sheila, can I tell you, I didn't vote to leave. I voted for Remain.
Oh, but you've become a Brexiter since.
Yes, because of the position of people standing there and saying you didn't know what you voted for, and that is just fundamentally wrong, to call somebody stupid and say you didn't know what you voted for just because you don't agree with their position.
Tell me what you think successful Brexit will amount to. Yeah.
Well, if people say to take back control of our borders and our immigration, but actually the EU actually do nothing for us, in my eyes. We give them a lot of money and they just go and spend it on wishy-washy projects. So we can keep that money for ourselves. People say businesses are going to be hurt. Yeah, I run my own business. I'm an electrician. I employ 4 guys under my, under me. And we haven't had a problem with any kind of business. Construction, with Carillion going under, that obviously took a hit. But, why can we not see the positives in the country of what leaving the EU is going to bring? We can trade with the world. The European...
But if Robert, let's just, we're guessing here because we don't know what's going to happen, but if we find that the deal with America is harder to get and is costly, and we find that the deal that we can get with the EU...
what are the EU going to want from us for that?
Well,
are they going to
I don't know, but
them?
what they are is a huge market on our doorstep, and what we are is a huge market on their doorstep. So there's a desire. No, but there's a desire for a deal. This isn't about knocking us or them. There is a desire for a deal from both sides there. But what if neither deal is economically as good in the long term? We won't know for a long time, but what if either deal isn't as economically successful as the deal we had with as members of the European Union? Is that something you can be relaxed about because you think there are other gains than financial from leaving the EU?
Yes, because it's like we can actually do things in our own country, and we haven't got to rely on the EU to. It's like my mate works he works on the sewers. And it might be going off topic, but just EU regulations on flushable products, they say they're unflushable. Now, the products what we have block up our drains in this country, and the EU have stopped us from manufacturing our own, what are they called? Wet wipes? The wet wipes. We can't make our own biodegradable ones because of EU laws. Now, our drains are not set for that, if you know what I mean, but that's a problem. Just one little problem with the EU of their regulations, So just
so you think
like that.
So you believe Boris Johnson, and you agree with Boris Johnson when he talks about unleashing potential that you believe has been stymied because of our membership of the EU.
Our country is so great, Sheila. It's so amazing. I love my country. I love everybody in it. Whatever colour you're from, whatever background you're from, whether you voted Labour, Conservative, Liberal Democrat, it doesn't matter. We've got a brilliant country.
Well, you've even voted Remain and Leave in a sense, haven't you, Robert? I'm presuming you voted. Did you vote for Boris Johnson in the election?
Yes, I did. Yes, and that was because of I like Boris Johnson. He shows a positivity that we haven't seen in this country for so many years from a leader since Tony Blair. I'd say, and that positivity is what this country needs. Not it's going to be doom and gloom when we leave the EU. Why not look to a bright future?
The gloomsters, the gloomsters, and the doomsters, as he called them.
Yes, and he's right because we just had the election, so 368 constituencies, all those constituencies are stupid and thick and believe in doom and gloom.
No, they're not. Robert, thank you. Robert in Stourbridge, thanks very much indeed for your call.
Tony says we should abolish the House of Lords, move to an elected second chamber who've got powers to hold the government to account and stop absolute power. James in Southampton says, I don't agree with abolishing or reforming the Lords. The purpose of the Lords is to scrutinise based on experience without the need to represent constituents or worry about winning the next election. They truly have the country's best interests at the forefront. Ricky is next in Glasgow. Ricky, what would you do with the Lords?
Hi. Well, I would return it to an unelected body, hereditary. One of the advantages now, women rank as their first in line. They now also rank to take their place in the House of Lords on a hereditary system. So that would bring more women into the House of Lords.
And where's the joy, where's the advantage for us all in the House of Lords being populated by people who are only there because of who their parents were?
Exactly. Well, everybody stands a chance of having their parents being in the House of Lords. It's open to everybody. Now, that's all very well going in a huff and saying that.
I don't quite follow, Ricky. So how would you get people into the House of Lords? How would you choose them?
Well, it would be hereditary. It's first in line for the estate, women now qualify to be first in line.
Yes, I got that point, but I'm wondering who would they be? How would you populate the House? So if you're going to start from scratch, would you, or would you keep the hereditaries who are there?
The hereditaries who are there would stay.
Right.
The advantage of this system is that they need not be frightened of the radio, television, newspapers.
Yes.
They can be open and honest to the public and not lose their seat by just telling the truth. And if it is hereditary, and say if a young lady takes her place there, you're talking about experts. If she can draw on the knowledge of experts, be it from the police or anybody else, but you now have a representative from the whole of the population, not just picked by the buddies who are all in the political game. So I see an advantage in the hereditary system. I know your point you're making. Where do we start?
Well, I'm just wondering. I mean, it's a random accident, isn't it? It's a random accident who you get. I mean, it's a bit like me saying. Well, it's a bit like me saying the current person who's talking to me on LBC should be in the House of Lords.
Good idea. That'll do. No, if you get my point, that's what I'm putting forward. It won't be agreed with by many people, but I think it's best that we see more women in the House of Lords on the hereditary system. I don't think women are stupid, any more stupid than men, and vice versa. And if they wish to draw on what women have experienced and need to know about and pass on knowledge on about, they're in the House of Lords now, and so be it. It's okay trying to look for something perfect, but the hereditary system leaves those who earn their place, or shall we say, pick up the place in the House of Lords.
But what, Ricky, if the hereditary system, if it means that ultimately you've got a whole load of unqualified, stupid people in the upper house?
Is that not what we have at the moment? Oh, I shouldn't have said that, should I?
And on that bombshell, Ricky, thank you.
Good morning, Nick. Well, I actually live right on the coast of Deal, and when you go for a nice Sunday jaunt with your loved ones and you see the border force boats in the channel, it's becoming a bit, well, it's not welcome, really. No. I mean, I live from Sandwich Bay to my left, and I've got Kingsdale and Dover to my right.
I know where you are.
Within 8 miles.
Yes.
And there is stuff even being reported here that hasn't hit mainstream news. We don't see a week go by without 2 or 3 boats, whether they're small little dinghies landing on Kingsdown Beach or Goodwin Sands. Yeah. It is a problem, and I'm really furious about it because I'm getting to the stage now, and I do disagree with you to a little point.
Okay, go ahead.
When you said that when they leave countries of persecution, whether it's Somalia or Syria or Pakistan, Iran or whatever, you know, they come here. Well, they shouldn't come here. Why come to the UK?
Because they want to better their lives, Paul.
Well, better their lives somewhere else in Europe. They pass through so many countries.
No, I agree with you here, but you can't blame someone.
Go to a country of safe haven.
No,
Stop letting us be the dumping ground.
No, I think actually you and I are at cross, because you can't blame someone for wanting to improve their life, but what's wrong is we have the Lisbon Treaty, which means that when they land at, we're just going to say for the purpose of debate, Italy, then they are Italy's responsibility. They don't effectively get passed up the line until they get to Calais and then come over to Deal.
But that shouldn't be the case. It's not our problem.
No, I agree. It should be dealt with by Italy or France.
Yeah, absolutely. Or Belgium, Switzerland, Austria, whatever.
Well, not Switzerland because they're not in the EU. But doesn't this speak to the supposed magnificence of the European Union? They have this crisis, and by the way, I don't blame them. Eastern European countries such as the Czech Republic and others, when they're asked to take more migrants to share the load out between France and Italy and Germany, what do they say? No way. So it just doesn't work, the European Union, in this issue.
And it doesn't, because I've got a second home in Malta, and Malta have actually so many times turned round when they're leaving Syria and they're coming up towards the Maltese coast, turning around and saying, I don't think so. You carry on. That's why they're landing in Italy and Sicily, because Maltese don't want them.
Yes.
And that's what we should be saying now, not picking them up and then giving them 2 years grace in Turkey. They should be shoved on a plane and sent back immediately. We don't want it on the Kent coast, and we definitely don't want it in the UK.
Lastly, campaigners would say they might have uncles or aunts or relatives somewhere in the UK, so they have a right to try and claim a life and a livelihood in the United Kingdom. Paul, what would you say to them?
Tough, no.
Even. Back to business. 10:34, that is the time. We are asking why the Labour Party is so riddled with division. And while it might seem like an obvious question, I suspect, like me, when you start trying to answer it, you'll realise that it's potentially a much bigger question than you initially realised. That Matt Ford, the comedian and political commentator, very big talent actually, if you're not familiar with Matt, has just tweeted, saw Tony Blair deliver an hour of common sense this morning. For all the talk and noise, he's still the politician who understands the public better than any other. Labour has to learn to listen to winners. The public think it's weird that they don't. Discuss. 10:34. Rob is in Leeds. Rob, what would you like to say?
Hi, morning, James.
Hello, Rob.
Right.
Right. Oh, Rob means business. Everybody sit down. Notebooks out. Right. Let's go.
Okay. I think the problem is within our sort of two-party first-past-the-post system, both parties are obviously very broad coalitions, and I think the problem within Labour at the moment is the gap between the right and the left of the Labour Party has become so wide that under any kind of proportional representation system, they would have split into two parties.
And yet there was always room for Jeremy Corbyn and his serial whip defying in Tony Blair's Labour Party.
Yes, but because they posed no sort of threat to... I mean, Blair had such a large sort of majority that... Jeremy Corbyn at that time was just...
like a token rebel, honest, in a way.
I hadn't even heard of him until he stood for
no shame in that, I don't think. Fair enough. And an awful lot of his most passionate advocates hadn't either. He just became a vessel into which they could pour all of their most... fevered dreamings.
Well, I don't think that's fair. Because
it is, because some of these people weren't born when Jeremy Corbyn started off in Parliament.
Yes, I know, but, this sort of fevered dreaming...
Oh, all right. I'll scratch that then. I didn't... You're right. I've just been a bit cheeky. It's Chris Moyles' influence. But the Conservative Party isn't a broad church. Quite the opposite. The Conservative Party has actively purged all moderates or centrists or people who weren't... Like Nicky Morgan, who weren't... But, she gets a job in Cabinet because she was... Matt Hancock, they went on telly and said things they know aren't true. Nicky Morgan had spoken on the record about how she could never serve in Boris Johnson's cabinet, and yet here she is. So they've sold their souls. They've got a bigger problem, surely, with a lack of diversity.
Right, okay, with the Tory party, I think there's one thing above all that unites
power.
A lust for power, yes, you've taken the words out of my mouth. It was a lust for power. I remember hearing Alistair Campbell speak once, I think it was after the... what was it, the 2015, was it, election?
Ed Miliband.
Ed Miliband was there. I remember him saying that one thing we've learnt from this is there's one thing that the Tories are absolutely passionate about, and that is power, and they will burn any policies, burn any sort of... sense of decency just to get into power. I mean,
so that's a big answer.
A known liar and an adulterer, they will take him.
Doesn't matter if that's the best chance of winning. You're over the line. Of course, I mean, the problem here becomes that old tension. And the first ever phone-in we did about Jeremy Corbyn came down to this. It was people saying he puts principles ahead of pragmatism and power. He'd rather be right in defeat than wrong in victory. As it's turned out, he's been wrong and defeated, but that's the problem, and that is probably a big part of it. Within the Labour Party itself, people cannot understand, as Matt Ford just said, why wouldn't you listen to winners?
Right, well, hang on, just before we get there. One of the reasons I would say it's not just down to, sort of Jeremy Corbyn's policies or whatever, that Labour. I think this defeat of Labour was a long time in the making. It goes right back to Blair, who I find absolutely appalling that he should sort of...
I know. Damn him with his 3 general election victories and huge Labour majorities.
But is that...
Well, we need more of Jeremy Corbyn's brand of politics. If we can do as badly as 1935 this time round, we should be aiming to do as badly as 1835 next time.
You're now talking like a Tory.
Why don't I F off and join them, Rob? Is that the next line?
No, that's not what I'm saying.
Okay. So tell me why you find the winner abhorrent and the loser sympathetic.
Well, you're trying to put words in my mouth.
Okay, what word would you use to describe what Tony Blair did in 3 general elections?
Part of the problem, Bob.
What word would you use to describe what he did in 3 general elections if you don't like winner?
I think he took the party so far to the right, it was almost indistinguishable from the Tory party.
Indistinguishable from Michael Howard and Ian Duncan Smith's Tory party?
Yeah. At that point, you had at that time you had a Labour Party that didn't do anything to roll back the sort of neoliberal sort of agenda that Thatcher had put in place.
And here it is, unintentionally, the answer you've provided to the question of why the Labour Party is so divided couldn't be clearer. Joseph's in Lightwater. Joseph, what would you like to say?
I don't think it is as badly divided as...
Can you get your head out of that bucket, please, and talk to me down a normal phone line? My patience wears thin at these moments, Joseph. I'm not going to lie to you, but we shall try and give you a chance in a moment. Paul is in Ashford. Paul, what would you like to say? No? James is in St John's. Paul is in Ashford. What would you like to say?
Hiya. The Labour Party is, I believe, is the most democratic political party in Great Britain.
Go on.
And the policies of the leader are decided by the membership. Now, to get to those policies, you have to take one view or another view, and within the Labour Party,
yes,
there are those views. Now that's seen as infighting, but do you know what? That's the most healthiest debate going, and that produces.
It's not a debate about policies, Paul.
Decided by its members.
It's not a debate about policies, is it? So think about the manifesto as a product. Okay.
Yeah, but the leader of the Labour Party
hang on a minute.
should not be blamed for the Labour Party policies.
No, but he's not being blamed for the policies, is he? He's been blamed because many people found the policies quite persuasive and attractive, albeit that they were offered up in a sort of weird, messy conglomeration of claim and counterclaim. Let's imagine that the Labour Party's manifesto was the mother of all manifestos, Paul. Come with me on a journey to a place where the Labour Party's manifesto was absolutely magnificent, a thing of unalloyed beauty, a veritable departure from 100 years of neoliberalism and consensus politics and a brave new dawn of equality and liberalism. The problem is the bloke selling it was a muppet.
Yeah, unfortunately, Jeremy was toxic. I wanted, and during that leadership time, I wanted John McDonnell to be selling those policies. I think if we'd have had John McDonnell, there would have been a different result.
Why?
But
why?
I agree
Just in terms of
leader,
plausibility and I think you're probably right. Things would have gone better under John McDonnell because he is oddly more ideological than Jeremy Corbyn, but less stubborn and more human, I think. Except now I'm alienating a significant swathe of my listenership who still can't see Jeremy Corbyn as anything other than a messiah. David is in Preston. David, what made you pick up the phone?
Hey, James, I was listening to you on the radio, and...
that's always a helpful preparation for ringing in. Good man.
Yeah, but what it is, I was listening to some of your views, and I can quite clearly gather that you're from the left.
But not the left necessarily. I think that there's a lot of unfairness in the country that is probably best described as the distribution of wealth. And as we see workers having their rights and indeed their wages stripped away, the richest people in the country since 2010 have got considerably richer. I just think I'd like to see a bit more sharing. If that's left, then yes, then I'm left.
Yeah, I have this discussion with people at work all the time. We disagree slightly, and
you want less sharing.
No, I don't want less sharing, no.
So what do you disagree about?
I just disagree with, basically, I live in Preston. It's like quite a multicultural area.
Yes.
But I kind of wrap my head around why people on the left support immigration on the way that they do. Being from an area like that, I can just see why
it's not a question of supporting or not supporting. For me, it's a question of what is the value of a human being, and that isn't determined by the country on their passport. It's determined by their behaviour or their actions. But you said you were listening to the radio, so you heard me say, why does the background of Labour leaders matter? That's the question that we're addressing today, mate.
Well, it matters because of the things that they come out with when I'm talking to other people, like the Tories do this, the Tories do that, and they're not out for working people. This is all I hear all the time. And when I look at who's at the top of Labour Party,
yes,
and they're just basically the same as the Tories. They come from the same backgrounds.
And that's a problem for you, is it?
Not really, no. It's just that you're making it into a problem, basically.
So what? I'm being a bit dumb, David. I think. What have you rung in to say, mate?
Well, I was ringing in initially to say to you. You said, "Why does it matter?" On the way, the Labour Party, where did it come from? And while I was on hold, you actually said, "Well, it doesn't." Because at first you said, "The Prime Ministers have come from Eton," so I was going to say that. But you answered basically. You answered me while I was waiting on the phone.
I see. So you've got nothing to add, really.
I will support Labour in the future.
Yes. Again, do you... I mean, look, here is a Labour politician who went to public school. Here is a Labour politician who went to comprehensive school and his dad drove a bus. Does that make any... That doesn't affect your opinion of either of them, I wouldn't imagine, does it? So where is this idea come... I agree with you. Where do you think this idea is coming from, that it matters? Where is this message coming from, that because Emily Thornberry's husband is a High Court judge, so she could, if she wanted, call herself Lady Nugee, she's somehow...
He's done all right for himself, hasn't he? So every credit to the fella.
Say again?
He's done all right for himself, so every credit to the fella.
Yeah, so where do you think this idea is coming from, that it somehow matters if Keir Starmer has also done all right for himself and ended up a millionaire, or he's got a knighthood, or... Where is it coming from? Where is it coming from?
Coming from the media, isn't it? Both sides are pushing their narratives.
Yeah, I can see it coming from one side. I can't see it. I mean, largely because if you were a fully paid up member of the Jeremy Corbyn fan club, then you wouldn't be able to argue that you can only be a proper Labour leader if you've been down pit for the last 20 years. I'm sorry that that your fox got shot while you were on hold. I hope next time you ring in, we can have a slightly more fruitful chat.
I'm feeling very optimistic about this new government, very optimistic about Boris taking the country forward, and I think there are plenty of reasons to be cheerful. Your previous caller talking about the creeping privatisation of the NHS, I think he's been misled by Pilger, who is just a serial whinger, to be perfectly honest.
Well, you haven't... hold on a second, Claire. Let's leave John Pilger to one side. There has been increasing privatisation in the NHS for decades.
There has. I don't actually think that's a bad thing. I think that it's not... You're assuming that... Well, they are assuming that privatisation is bad. If privatisation can provide services and cut waiting lists so that people don't have to wait for their hip operations and all that sort of thing, I don't think that's a bad thing at all. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I think it's still... The principle that the NHS is still free at the point of use when it's needed by people is still there, and there's no suggestion at all that this government is going to do anything other than that.
And what else in this speech has put a smile on your face?
It's just, to be honest, it's the optimism. I don't see why for the last few years there's been this awful gloomy pessimism, and everyone has assumed that it's all going to be bad and that leaving the EU is going to be a disaster, and I just think that that's not helpful. It doesn't encourage investment, it doesn't encourage people to go out and set up businesses, and I think that a tone of optimism will actually take this country forward in a far better way than all that gloomy pessimism we've had for the last few years.
Let's hear from Angela in Rochdale. Hi, Angela.
Hello, Sheila. I've never spoken to you before, but good afternoon.
Good afternoon to you. Thank you for calling the programme.
Right. First of all, I was going to vote Brexit last week, and at the last minute I decided Conservative. Now, when they got an overwhelming majority to govern, I thought, I know Boris isn't that great on detail, but he is good at galvanising people. And you can bet yourself that he will get all the departments together and tell them exactly what he wants. He'll get the right people in, and Michael Gove is one of them. And I believe Boris's vanity and ego will spur him on to do all the things he said he would do, and thumb his nose up at Michael Heseltine, John Major, and the rest of them. And if he stands firm about our fishing rights and our free port and building free ports and the health service and workers' rights, I believe he will go on and he will get another majority. And one of the reasons I couldn't vote for the Labour Party was the stance on defence and the way they were speaking about NATO. Now, I don't care what anybody thinks about President Trump, but America is our ally. And if we were ever in trouble or invaded or threatened, you can bet that America would be the first one of our allies to help us. And the thought of Diane Abbott saying what she did about NATO and the submarines up in Scotland, if they got in power, they would have had a pact with Nicola Sturgeon to give a Scottish referendum. And because of both of the Scotland and the Labour Party stance on nuclear submarines, you can bet they'd just be left in port or got out of Scotland.
So you...
And where would we be then?
So you're placing a whole lot of faith now, aren't you, in Boris Johnson? He got your vote in the election, and he might not have. You were talking there about the Brexit Party as well. He got your vote, and you want to hold him one way or another to that promise, to those promises.
Yes. And I believe he will do his utmost. I know he's looked upon sometimes as a fun character, but he is highly intelligent. He's very articulate, but he'll show them all. I don't think his vanity will let him do otherwise.
Thank you, Angela. Really interesting take. Boris Johnson, his vanity makes him want to succeed. So, Daniel, it has a strange feel to it, doesn't it, this?
Yeah, but I just rang in to say personally that lady, Lisa, who rang in, is the entire reason why the Labour Party lost. Because, honestly, the way she just spoke about people like myself, I'm highly insulted. I hope she's listening. You really insulted me. I don't understand how you could make these assumptions about me. Basically called me either an idiot or a racist, one of the two. And I'm neither. I'm an immigrant myself. My family are immigrant background. We came to this country. We're proud of this country. We work extremely hard. I come from a council estate. My mum was a single parent. I've got 13 brothers and sisters from both sides, all of us mixed heritage. And you know what? We all work hard, want to get things done. I don't have any problem with immigration or anything. I just personally believe in Brexit for reasons of my own, that I believe we shouldn't be ruled by any other country. Pardon me. For 1,000 years, nobody's conquered this country, and I don't believe that we should give up our independence.
Nobody conquered it.
No, but I'm saying,
but when you went, no, but
just
for a minute,
superior. Anybody should be superior to us. That's my reasoning. But nonetheless, I'm not racist, and she's basically just come on the radio and said to me that unless you believe in this, you're a racist. You want less immigration, less smaller classes, all of this due to immigration. That was her one thing, and that's extremely rude. Extremely rude.
Well, I did point out to her that she was.
You did
assuming people were.
I'm a massive fan of yours, Sheila. Although we're different politically slant, I'm a massive fan
on some
of
things,
yours.
but not everything, I'm sure. And Daniel, on Brexit, though, you know, I disagree with your characterisation of what being in the EU was, but that's okay. You know, you've won the day. Congratulations, Brexit's going to happen. But isn't the reality that our relationship and membership, more importantly, of the EU? Do you accept that it brought? Not to everybody, but that it brought big economic advances in this country.
On the radio, 1 second. I do believe that it did bring economics to it, and I didn't vote on an economical basis. Not everything in life is purely about economics.
You just thought the Parliament and nothing else should be where decisions are made about this country.
Exactly. And when people say they don't trust our government, you have the capacity to change your government. When you can change your government, you can create change. But when we can't change the people who have more power, the EU can set rules that the Queen has to abide by. The Queen who's meant to be the leader of our country, I don't believe in a Queen personally, but the concept that we have a Queen that has to abide by rules that somebody else in another country sets, I don't agree with that. I think that's terrible. I think that we as a country should rule ourselves and determine. And we as the people, thank God we live in a democracy where we can change our leaders. And
okay, well, let me put to you slightly differently some of the points I put to Lisa. If I was saying to Lisa, if in 2-3 years' time, those places that voted for Boris Johnson, unusually voted for Boris Johnson and voted Conservative.
Just like me, I would never have voted for Boris Johnson, usually.
Well, if in 3 years' time there is no evidence of a benefit to Brexit, no evidence that he's keeping his promises on schooling, on health, on social care, on economic prosperity in those regions. What then? He's still there, Daniel? Oh, I think he's had enough.
If James is in Norfolk. James, are you ready to move on?
Hi, yes, I'm very. Last week I was so happy because of it was the only time in my life that my votes actually counted in the referendum, and 3.5 years of the MPs willfully trying to bulldoze out a vote has made me very ill from stress and worry. And there's lots of people like me, but no one mentions that. You know, we voted in good faith and we wanted our vote to be implemented, and now we have finally got it through that, you know, next year I believe that like a big weight's been lifted and we can move on as a country, as a United Kingdom.
And can you reach out to Remain and say, I feel your pain, let's come together?
Not really, because of what I feel is they've had their way for too long, you know, and we voted in a fair vote. Look, I hate the word EU citizenship. There's no such thing. We never voted to be an EU citizen. You know, we're the United Kingdom, and we never had given consent to the project to what it's become. So,
but James, let me suggest to you. Let me suggest to you, James, that you've won. I know you would rather have prevailed much sooner. But let me suggest to you that you've won. You're on the winning side. You're entitled to feel excited and proud and happy. And I'm suggesting to you that there are lots of people who are, for want of a better expression, on the losing side, who don't feel any animosity towards you, but they do have some genuine fear about the future. And I just wonder whether, you know, you can find it in you to be nice.
Well, I mean, like, I will always respect votes. Like, I never voted for Tony Blair, but I had to just have his government for 13 years, and I always respect the Democratic vote if it goes against me. But for the first time it went my way, and it's like we've seen like people like Hilary Benn laughing at us basically on the telly trying to overturn our vote, and like he was showing no compassion to us. And you know, lots of people I know, because we've got an older population in North Norfolk, they've been very ill with worry from it, you know, and it's not been right on their health, mental health especially. So I'm actually really happy we've got it done, and it's ridiculous to suggest that people are going to be sent home. It's just ridiculous.
Well, we'll see. James, thank you very much.
Julian.
I'm here.
Hi, Charles. So you hear Julian is in Germany, and he called it a ticking time bomb, this speeded up agenda. What do you say?
You want me to refer to his case? Well, let me tell you. You see, the point is we do not actually bargain properly. We have given these Europeans in this country, you know, what they want to stay here. And yet, you see, we didn't make it conditional on what would happen to our people in Europe. This is the nonsense of the bargaining that we do. You've got to have no deal on the table and be firm. Anyway, the shocking news that I've just heard over the BBC now about the Cobham thing is this is Boris Johnson's first sellout of genuine leavers. Let's make no mistake. This is Boris Johnson's first sellout of genuine leavers, and therefore, you see, the point is he just wants to be Prime Minister and leader of the Conservative Party, and he has taken back into the party so many people that were opposed to him as Remainers, and he's got to keep his party together.
Okay, let's just press pause, because there's a lot. You're saying a lot, and you're saying it quickly. And I want to unravel a little of what you've said. So you're talking about Cobham, the sale of a very old and distinguished aircraft manufacturer, a British aircraft manufacturer, to an American interest, and you're saying that is a sellout, and the first sellout of Boris Johnson. So I'm trying to understand whether
there could be more sellouts. That's what I'm saying, because we want our own country. We want to run our own businesses. There's no difference really selling out to the Americans and selling out so many British to the Europeans. We did not campaign to be the 51st state of America.
Okay.
We leavers want independence.
What does that? But what does that?
Country.
Okay. Well, what does that mean? Who are you going to do business with? I mean, how is that going to work? I mean, if you're sort of suggesting that this is a sellout to have any kind of deal with the Americans, there are trade deals which are going to be done now with other countries. That is the nature of the economy that we are in. I'm trying to understand what your ideal scenario is, Charles Brand. What is it?
The ideal is that we promote
our own businesses in our own country under our own control, not have a closing down sale of all British assets to any foreign power that comes, or company that comes along and has enough money to buy us out. For goodness sake, this has been happening all the time while we've been in Europe. So many businesses, I mean, look at our railways sold out to European.
Well, I hear the anger in your voice, Charles. Thank you.
I know